We are restarting the video because I accidentally shared some open source intelligence, or OSINT or OSINT, to the screen. I'm performing a penetration test as practice on a couple of friends' website with their permission. And that's something, before we start this, you are potentially breaking laws if you perform this type of reconnaissance on systems that do not have your permission to do so. Passive reconnaissance in general might be legal because you are looking at public data, but getting into active reconnaissance and really digging into their systems, you're treading the line there, and you want to look into your state and federal statutes to see what's legal. Best bet is to use sandboxes to play with, maybe setting up your own home lab network or using platforms like TryHackMe or Hack the Box and seeing what kind of sandboxes they have for exploit testing. Beyond that, today we are going to practice Nmap. We're going to keep in mind the attack framework from MITRE or MITRE a little bit here. We're going to be in the reconnaissance phase. The MITRE attack framework, feel free to correct me if it's MITRE. The MITRE attack framework basically lays out the steps for what hackers might walk through in terms of gaining access to a system and then attacking it and stealing or whatever they're trying to do. Starting with the recon phase, which is where we're going to be working on today. We are looking at the attack MITRE framework here, and simply put, it's a catalog of exploits. It doesn't actually contain exploits, but I think it was TryHackMe's Advent of Cyber where they had you running PowerShell and you were able to load these exploits up and run them on their sandbox. So there are ways to do that related to the MITRE attack framework, and you can also use, like on Kali Linux, the Metasploit framework has a bunch of exploits you can load up. Anyhow, let's get back to work here. We are playing with Nmap first, a network mapping scanning tool to see basically what open ports are available. So let's start on the terminal and try the first ping scan here. The SN argument is S for script, and I think is indicating it's going to be a ping scan. And we're going to try scanme.nmap.org. I'll autofill by pressing the right arrow, press enter, and we see some details here. Scan report, latency, an IPv6 address, and an IPv4 address. Let's perform a deeper scan. Let's try identifying ports 1 to 1000 Nmap. -P for port argument, and then passing through what we want in terms of ports to be scanned. You could do up to 65,000 range if you wanted to. And it would take longer, of course. nmap.org, press enter, and perform that ping scan. And we find 3 ports: SSH, secure shell, SMTP, I think is a email protocol, and HTTP, an unsecured hypertext translation protocol, or insecure internet, basically. You'd want to see on your own website HTTPS or 443 here. We can do a deeper scan with SV to find versions or platforms that are being used on those ports to make them work. I don't know the proper vocab for that, but say with SSH, we're going to see port 22 is using OpenSSH. I could take this version, now that I've done some recon, I could go into the Metasploit framework, for instance, and search for this platform and see if there are any known exploits. and then I could start running exploits on the IP address here. In Nmap, you can also use the IP address to look things up. It seems to be a little bit faster because there's no domain name translation to IP occurring. -SC, S for script, C I think is default. Default script of Nmap. It's interesting to be seeing this. We have different encryption keys here. Probably if it's RSA is an asymmetric encryption service, so this is probably their public key or something like that. This is a testing site for this stuff, so you're not normally going to see these items shared unless there is an active vulnerability awaiting exploit. It is setting up a couple things, an Easter egg here, elite in LeetSpeak 311-31337. Sick. Let's put our hacker hoodie on. On that note, all right. All of this can also be performed within Nmap. Nmap is the graphical user interface. I don't think we need the sudo. I'm just going to send it anyway. It's the graphical user interface. What? Let's see if we got Nmap. apt-get. Actually, let's do a where. Nmap. apt-get. Do we just need apt install? Let's try it. Probably need sudo too. Yeah. Up on the command line to pull that command back up. Nmap has no installation candidate. The following packages replace it and if. Alright, let's just ignore this. I have Nmap installed on my local Kali. I think that's what I'm getting confused by. Nonetheless, Nmap is basically you plug in the same arguments just by pressing and selecting on drop down menu items and plugging in the IP address or domain. So you can run sudo nmap or nmap. I don't know if we'll see any more useful data if we do that. I think it's going to show us the same stuff. But long story short, Nmap is a good step 1 or step 2 when performing your reconnaissance, if you're performing like a penetration test or something like that, because it's going to tell you about open ports. If you had like an open FTP port, you could then try and FTP into that IP address, see if they have the default anonymous credentials or something for FTP still set up, and then you would then have access to their files potentially. SSH as well, SSHing into their IP, seeing if the default credentials haven't been changed, stuff like that. You might get more advanced, and I'm trying to teach myself this now, as potentially once you see that they have an open port on SSH, trying to use a password cracker through that port 22 of their IP in order to try and brute force their password. So some options there. Keep in mind, a lot of this can get you in trouble if you're just playing around on the internet and running these scans and trying to find exploits or vulnerabilities on websites. So make sure you're using a sandbox or you have express permission in writing from companies saying that you can do that. So we'll stop there on Nmap. Most important things here, we've got the port listed, -HV. It's one of my favorites, so you can see versions, which you can then take those versions and see if they have exploits on those particular versions of those systems or programs. Aside from that, we'll get into Nessus next. We'll see you then.